Hello and welcome to another episode of Words with Myself.
Words are one of the most powerful tools at your disposal. They have an absolutely massive impact on your life, and you may not even be fully aware of the extent of which this impact has. For instance, most of the information that you digest is consumed through the perspective of words. Aside from information directly ingested through your senses, most of the information that we come across has already been pre-digested and then put into words for us to interpret into a feeling and an experience. That's the mark of a good writer, someone who can craft their writing in a way that impacts you so you feel like you're there. You feel like it's your experience. But there are many ways that someone can interpret these words, and there's also many ways that someone can deliver those words. So there is a lot of room for inaccuracy. Even the most accurate kind of writing is very short of all the context of actual experience. I'm sure you all know someone who goes into the most overt detail when telling a story, and you're like, cut it out. Skip to the good bit already. Give me what happened. I don't need every single detail. But if you imagined you were trying to convey a message or tell a story or write something down, you would have to use an enormous amount of words if you wanted to stand a chance of even getting it remotely accurate. So we take a lot of shortcuts in writing and speech in order to cut down what we're saying to something that is tolerable but also digestible. Something that is interesting and has enough detail for you to understand what is meant, but not so much detail that it becomes saturated. And knowing just how complicated a process it is to accurately put something into words, you then have to think about your own language and how often you speak without truly giving considerate thought to what you're about to say. For most of us, the only times we truly set aside time to think about what we're going to say is if we were doing something like a speech, either at a wedding or at work or something like that, or preparing for a meeting. Normally, most people talk very colloquially. They only talk how it comes out. They're not putting much thought to what they're going to say. It just comes naturally to them. But every single word has a vibration. It has a frequency. It has a resonance to it. It has an impact on your body. It has an impact on those around you. And it greatly impacts people's perception of you. How you communicate things becomes who you are to most people. If you're the kind of person that every time someone asks you, "Oh, how are you?" and you say, "Yeah, I'm all right," then people are going to know immediately their image of you is that things are not really all right, that you're just making do and that you're upset. And that's probably even quite accurate that you have given them that perception of you. However, it might not be, or it might not be what you want people to perceive you as. But the point is that the words and how you say them, the delivery of those words, has an enormous impact on the world around you and within you. Even without the spiritual side of words, just the fact that you communicate well, people are going to assume that you're educated and intelligent. If you speak confidently, people are going to assume that you are confident. If you speak really uncertain and very anxiously, then people are going to believe that you are anxious and uncertain. Throughout all of time, this has been known. If you look at royalty versus the peasants, for instance, way back in medieval times, poor people weren't educated, so they weren't able to articulate themselves or communicate complex ideas. And it was very well known that people who had money would keep education from poor people, because if poor people were educated, then they would riot. Then they would be able to talk about ideas that went against the ideas that they were told. There was this expectation for poor people to just do as they were told and not think for themselves. And even to think for yourself, you need to be able to articulate something clearly to yourself so that you can then communicate that out. And a lot of your train of thought is this process, is you talking to yourself or talking yourself through something and explaining it to yourself. That ability is a blessing and a gift that we often take for granted, but it can also be a curse. You can communicate things negatively towards yourself. You can build a bad image of something. You can destroy as you can create with words. You can either tell yourself loving things which are affirmative of your greatness, or you can tell yourself things that destroy your self-confidence and ruin your self-image. So these words hold a lot of power over you and hold a lot of power in general. And this is the idea. This is why education was kept from people that they wouldn't want to have power. Now, because the labour requirements have changed, what needs to be produced has changed, it requires education of the masses because the labour is different. We're not, churning away at fields or doing agriculture or farming now. We are building their businesses and, working on computers and all this kind of stuff. So we have to be literate. But this idea of control through language hasn't just been eroded. It hasn't gone anywhere. It has simply been adapted to suit the modern day requirements. If you look at the class system in the UK, for instance, people in the lower class typically talk very colloquially. It's almost always informal, and there is typically a high concentration of slang involved as well. And slang is very interesting because if you look at slang, you will typically see it's the inverse of a positive. So things become, that's the shit, or that's wicked, that's bad. These are all negative words, but it's describing things that are good, or in their eyes, they're positive. But they're using negative words. So instead of describing something in a positive way, you've now described it in a negative way. And the intention and what is communicated become two separate things. So you're actually talking negatively, but you have a positive intention. And if I was to say to you, would only using positive words in a positive way on a daily basis impact your life in a positive way or a negative way? You would probably agree that it's likely to have a positive impact, unless you were to assume the position that it would have no consequence, that it doesn't matter how you speak and whether you speak positively or negatively, you're saying the same thing. But as we discussed before, it's not. There is a clear consequence to the words that you use, not just in how others perceive and receive that information, but also in the fact that a word is a sound, and sound has resonance, and resonance is vibration. So it has a material impact in the world. If you were to meet a genie and he was to say to you, you have 3 wishes, and you were to say, I want to be tall, and then the genie makes you 7,000 foot, and you go, well, that's not what I meant. And he said, well, that's what you said. And then you said, no, that's not what I meant. Make me small. And then the genie makes you tiny. You're now 1 foot. And you go, no, that's not what I meant. I just want to be where I am before. So the genie puts you at the height you are. And you spent all 3 wishes just to end up right where you were. What a waste of wishes, eh? How you communicate with those around you and to yourself will impact directly what you believe, what you feel, and how you act in the world. It will also influence how people act towards you, how people perceive you, how people understand you. It has a true consequence on your life. And many of us spend a fair amount of time thinking, and we're thinking in words. And these words are communicating something internally towards ourselves. If we're describing ourselves using horrible words that we would never use for anyone else, that is going to negatively impact us on a subconscious level. Because we say, well, we don't talk to anyone else like that, but we talk to ourselves like that. What does that say about you? And even if you're not intentionally saying horrible things to yourself, if every time you describe something that is positive in your life in a negative way, or you use a word that is actually negative, subconsciously that's going to program you to believe that these things are bad. If, for instance, somebody asks you how you are and you say, yeah, I'm all right, then that's going to be what you believe of yourself, that things are just all right. If somebody asks you, how are you? And you say, I'm amazing every day, and I plan to be amazing for the rest of my days. That's the kind of thing that would make a real impression on somebody. They would think, wow, what an amazing person. And that would program your mind over time to then start thinking you're an amazing person. And then other people believe that you're an amazing person. And suddenly the whole world is in agreement with you that you're amazing and that your day is going amazing. But because you go out into the world and you say things like, yeah, I'm all right, or, things could be better, or, having this pessimistic language, the world is going to be in agreement with you. Someone's going to interpret that and go, yeah, you know what? The world is shit. There's bad things that happen. I lost something the other day, and today something inconvenienced me, and it's all just negative talk. And back to the historical side of it, even language has become less religious, which means that we don't often say things that typically would have been said before. A part of common speech was things like give thanks to God, or thank God, or bless you. These kind of words that reinforce really nice ideas, like giving thanks to God for what we have and receiving a blessing. But now, even that religious rhetoric has often become a negative. It's, oh my God, or for God's sake. These kind of negatives. If you look at things that often come up in Arabic conversations, for instance, a lot of it is referencing giving thanks to God, or if God wills it to be. And those kinds of messages reinforces that idea. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If God wills it. And when you are constantly saying these kind of things over and over as a part of your natural conversation, you are going to believe that and ingest that at a subconscious level. So when you're in fear or you're panicking or something like that, you're going to think, if God wills it, if it's meant to be, then it will be. And that's your truth. That's what you communicate to yourself. If every time you are struggling or going through something, you think, this is terrible, it always goes wrong for me, everything's bad, then that's what you're going to believe. And likely, that's what's going to happen. And I believe that this erosion of language was deliberate. If you still don't see the power of words, go and read something like 1984, for instance, which is a fantastic book on giving you an idea of just how far the extent is of the control of words and how you reveal your worldview through these words, how you explain things and how you get your philosophy and theology and how you get your understanding of the world all comes through these means of words. They are so fundamentally important, and yet we all just say whatever most of the time. We are clumsy and imprecise with what we say. Yet if you truly knew that every single word out of your mouth was a spell, and you were going to make things happen or change things with every word you said. If you got a superpower tomorrow, which secretly, you already have, but let's say you got a superpower tomorrow where everything you said was spoken into existence, you would not be prepared for it because you are so used to speaking imprecisely. It'd be the same as the genie. You would be bringing things all into existence accidentally, and you would be saying things that you wouldn't be ready to make happen. You might actually say something that would be really, really harmful, even accidentally. You might get angry and frustrated and say, you know what, I just wish everyone would fuck off and leave me alone. And then all of a sudden, everyone disappears. You might say, I'm so exhausted, I just need to crash. And all of a sudden, you're in a car accident. There are so many things that we say that if we were to truly be picked up on every little thing we say, I know it's nitpicky and annoying, but if you were to truly do that to yourself, you would get very frustrated. You would realize how often you say things that you don't mean to say. And when you truly understand the importance and the impact of words, you would be far more careful with what you say. I have gotten to the point where I'm not fearful, just I give words the respect they deserve. I try to. I'm not perfect and I mess up all the time. And it's still a very active process for me to unlearn poor communication that I have developed over the years. So it's definitely a process. However, I have a lot more respect for the words that I use now and how I say things, because I know that when I say something, there is a very high likelihood of it coming true. There are so many things in my life that I have spoke into existence. Most people would probably say that it's all coincidence. And if you want to believe that, I'm not here to convince you otherwise. I know the power of language, and I know the impact it has on my life. I also know that your words have an immense impact on your life. Even if you disagree with the power and magic of words, it still alterates your reality just by how others perceive and receive your communication. So your words impact your life like that. Whether you want to believe that you can speak things into existence or not, you can definitely shape your reality just with the words that you use. Given an example where, just try it. If you don't believe me, go and experiment. For the next month, just talk about things positively. Just say how great things are, how you are the luckiest person in the universe and so blessed to be alive, and everything good just seems to happen to you. You don't even need to work for it. All of this amazing stuff just happens for you. Frame everything through the lens of the positive. Frame everything as a way of a blessing and a gift and how wonderful it is to be alive. Wake up and say, the first thing you say, be, what an amazing life. I'm going to go live it. I'm so excited to live it. If you come back after a month and say, that didn't work for me at all, then I'll say, you know what? You're right, because it's not just words. It is belief, true belief, that makes it happen. And words are a means of communicating truth. And if you don't believe it's the truth, it's not truth for you. So it's not just the words, but words are a huge part of it, because the words that we use retroactively impact our belief. So the belief is the important part, but when you keep saying things negatively, that's what you're going to believe. If you keep saying things positively, that's what you're going to believe. And I'm not saying that we should only say positive things and not say negative things, but we should be very, very, very aware of the impact of what we say, of how we say it. Even to write a word correctly, we need to spell it. They are all spells. And if you truly ingrain that idea in your mind, that you are bringing things to life when you speak, that you are changing your reality with the words that you use, I think we would all be a little more careful about what we say. Thank you for listening.